Life is more than this, so much more than that. Much, much more than this, so much more than that. Life is more than this, so much more than that. Life is so much, so much, so much more. Your life is more than this, so much more than that. Much, much more than this, so much more than that. Your life is more than this, so much more than that. Life is so much, so much, so much more. Our lives are more than this, so much more than that. Much, much more than this, so much more than that. Our lives are more than this, so much more than that. Our lives are so much, so much, so much more.
Howdy everybody, let's get it. Jumping right in. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to the wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding, nor yet favor to men of skill, but time and chance happen to us all. Time and chance I look at. Chance. Effort is required, which is an expense of energy, I wrote. I continue. Suddenly, I had a flash. A flash was noted of a scene performed by the 1920s era comedic duo Laurel and Hardy. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, respectively. They are now at a full-service restaurant. This is what I'm seeing inside my head. That matched the era of the 1920s. I would say it was before the Roaring 20s and just before the Great Depression. The tables there had true tablecloths. They had silverware, probably real silver at that time. The salt and pepper shakers were glass and ornate. And then they also had cloth napkins. And it was customary at this time to place a napkin across one's lap, or in this case, Stanley cuffed a corner of the napkin at his collar and allowed the width of the napkin to act as a bib for protection. In this flash that I'm now seeing, I see Stanley served his meal. It was some sort of bean placed in the center of a white glass plate. I wrote lima bean, pinto bean. To my recollection, I saw a bean in my head. So he proceeds to dig into this bean presented on the glass plate. Like full steak dinner meal, he shakes a bit of salt and pepper on the bean and begins to use his knife and fork to dig in. The fork nor the knife did him any good because this single bean must not have been cooked very well. I continue. He decided to just pick this bean up and pop it in his mouth, and he crunched away. Now, all this while, his mate, Ollie, or Oliver Hardy, his comedic mate, he watched in suspense and disbelief, and hilarious muses and expressions came across his face. And many times, many times in the Laurel and Hardy movies, he would look directly into the camera so we could see his ire or his disgust or frustrations. I continue. What I wrote next is this. The moral of what I'm seeing came to this. The meal, or this meal or portion at present, is what you make it to be. And then I wrote, so let's start there. And then I wrote a catchphrase that was known for the Laurel and Hardy show. I wrote, well, here's another nice mess you've gotten me into. A lot of people say fine mess, but it's actually nice mess you've gotten me into. I continue. This offering speaks to accepting our assigned portions, as they are simply the beginning of the journey prepared. This video speaks to a virtuoso, is the word I was given, and so I wrote it down, of lifestyle possibilities and experiences, with a focus and determination as the foundation. Here to educate, inspire, and for observational purposes only, esoteric in nature. Let's get it. I continue. I write next the Goshen 70. For whatever reason, I kept seeing 70. There's something to that, so I wrote it down. The Goshen 70. Let me explain. The Goshen 70 were the people of Israel relegated to Egypt at the time. I continue. The people of Israel, the chosen of God, came to Egypt a minority, but left a nation or multitude of people. And they were under the leadership and guidance of the legendary Moses. Moses the prophet, Moses the teacher, Moses the lawgiver. The destination now awaiting them is Canaan, the land of promise, affectionately known as the land flowing with milk and honey, their determined portion. Next, I write to note, there awaits to all of us an expected end. How it will appear begins and ends with your choices and decisions along your path. And these choices and decisions are critical to your life's transitional stage. I continue. As the legendary Moses led the chosen nation toward Canaan, many challenges and tests were faced along the group's journey. Food was becoming a scarcity, but the Lord wanted to test their inner gangster. Sidebar. Gangster is what I heard, and it's what I wrote down. Ha! I continue. Manna was showered down by divinity to them, a sort of bread, I wrote, to help alleviate the feeding frenzy of so many. But there were, of course, consequences attached, as when to gather this manna, or how much of this manna to gather, or they would suffer spoilage and loss. They began to complain. Was there nothing more than this manna? The divine heard, he relented, and he gave them, I wrote, quail for meat. This was given in abundance. Even here they now complain. The portion sent by the divine, these resources, they're too much. Enough already. Anybody with me, or am I by myself? I continue. I write next a prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. I pause. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. I'm going to pause again. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. I continue. An expected end may require the opposite of the glitz and the glamour of lusted after access. To note, I wrote, simply that gangster in you is under targeted refinement, as each of our designated territories await our arrival. And then I wrote, all aboard, all aboard. Abundance up ahead for the abundant. Ashe? I continue. A portion, I wrote, from Brad Paisley, a song. I called a couple of lines. This is what I wrote. On the far side of the sky, the first thing that I'm going to do is spread my wings and fly. I'm going to land beside a lion and run my fingers through his mane. Or I might find out what it's like to ride a drop of rain. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, well, there'll be only happy tears. I'll shed the sins and struggles I've carried all these years. And I'll leave my heart wide open. I will love and have no fear. Yeah, when I get where I'm going, don't cry for me down here. Concord Music Publishing, LLC. Thank you, Brad Paisley. Moving on. Next I write, portion. A piece or a part of a whole. When, where, what, how. To be determined. Time and chance happeneth to us all by way of our current reality and experiences. The gratefulness for, or the lack thereof, this allotment and portion is granted to each of our individual journeys, now commencing. I continue. For some, I wrote, largesse, grandeur, nor the enviable silver spooned were the welcoming energies of our 3D reality, and therefore became targeted pursuits of our manifestations as we matured and nurtured inner standings. Next I write to note, there remains a portion that belongs to our peace. Ashe, I continue. In the words of Oliver Harvey, again, I go back to them. They had a bunch of catchphrases. Here's another one. He would say to Stan, and they would go back and forth with it. He'd say, tell me that again. And usually Stan would come back. He couldn't remember the good idea that he gave him the first time, and he would just give him some gibberish. And then Ollie would say, oh, I got it now. Hilarious. But as I can hear Obama saying, let me be clear. There is a portion that belongs to our peace. And then I also wrote, adding to that, eye has not seen, nor ear heard, neither has entered into our hearts the things that God has prepared for us that love him. Ashe? The video. Upgrade you? Upgrade you? Anyone? Upgrade? I continue. Along this video, you see Kobe Bryant. This is what I wrote. Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. They transitioned this life or this present reality January 26, 2020. And then I wrote, rest in power. Their portion, they shared with multitudes. He gave and gave us her. And the world gave right back. How did they do it, Charles? They did it in love. I continue. Hollywood Walk of Fame. Over 2,700 plus stars lay enshrined along the walkways. These gave, and we gave right back. The road now stands paved as a monument of achievements to the actors, to the musicians, to producers, to directors, to theatrical and musical groups, as well as fictional characters. Their portion and legacy left to us, from whence we draw daily. I continue. I wrote this as an honorable mention, but something about the scene of the videos spoke out to me, so I looked into it, and this is what I wrote. An honorary yet important addition. As since the 1800s, 1870s to be exact, the Sioux Nation continues to demand the return of that land upon which that sculpture now stands, the sculpture of those presidents, as the land is their portion and was illegally obtained. I continue. This country, I'm just going to say it just like that, did offer money to make settlement, but the Sioux land is their preferred outcome and portion. I'm going to say Ashe right there. Ashe. I continue. Next, the Cloud Gate. Located in my hometown, birth town, Chicago. This piece was inspired by the presence of liquid mercury, and I was drawn to it because of its reflective capabilities, and it showed everything that was around it. And as an entry to reflect the other lofty lifestyle possibilities in the videos to follow. I continue. I wrote a gate indeed, the Cloud Gate, a gate indeed. Ha! But I'm going to say this. Is it the bean? And I have in mind now Stan messing with that bean on that plate. And then I wrote, but you choose. I digress. I continue. The legendary Daniel of the Bible, along with his three friends, maybe you heard of them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're now held as captives and made to serve under the king of Babylon. Daniel was noted to be righteous and wise, and the will of God was made known to him many times through dreams and visions, which he understood. He understood to be his current and temporal portion or alike. I continue. Another biblical character, Hannah. And then I wrote the words, a drunkard? No. And that's in reference to she was so deep in prayer and reflection to God that when the priest saw her, he thought she had entered the temple drunk. And then I wrote, as the primary wife of Elkanah, she was unable to bear children, and her desired portion in this life was to bear children. She vowed, should God, Yahweh, the Most High, grant her this request, she would dedicate this child back to God. And she called him Samuel, which means heard by God. I continue. Then there was John the Baptist. He knew his destined portion. He knew his destined portion so much, he held himself to the dietary constraints of locust and wild honey. And then I write, then Jesus came. Isn't that a song? Jesus asks that he baptize him. But John felt unworthy to do this, but he did what was asked of him. And then suddenly a dove now descended upon Jesus, confirming the presence of the Holy Spirit. Next I wrote, known by some as the Ascendant Master Jesus. And then I write these words, 40 days, 40 nights in the wilderness, tested and challenged by the chief antagonist himself. The portion and allotment he came for and ultimately won, to equip and fortify the chosen with power and with authority. I next write the words IF. Let me explain. When Jesus was on the cross, ready to give up the ghost, just before the end, he declared, it, that's your first eye, is, that's your second eye, finished, that's your F. I usually refer it to as IF. I continue. Betrothing to us the Holy Spirit and the finished work of his shed blood. I continue. The chosen people, once relegated to Goshen, now have become a nation. They dealt with conflict, rebellions, and much more along the way to the land promised, which was their portion. All the while, the cementing of their inner gangster, I wrote, continued unabated by God. And it was done out of love and to further prepare them for what was to come. The lack of appreciation was shown for the manna, with which he fed them. And when they grew weary of this bread substance, the Lord gave them quail. These actions from the Most High brought them front and center with the shadow self, and consequently presented the honest for determined change before reaching their ultimate portion, the land flowing with milk and honey, or Canaan. I'm going to close with this, a song. And it goes like this. I just culled a couple of lines. When the sun comes shining, then I was strolling, and the wheat fields waving, and the dust clouds rolling. The voice was chanting as the fog was lifting. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Isle, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. Woody Guthrie, this land is your land. Our portion, as well as our stories, continue. This has been Charles, and we are typecentral.org. Thank you for your time, and as always, be blessed.